Okay, we've got one last thing left. One more level, a few more cutscenes, the last batch of combat sections, and certain puzzles, and even especially noticeable with one last boss fight. Then we're done with it forever. How bad can it be? Well, at least on the upside is though, Sonic, this will pretty much lead us to the final level in the game, known as Lyric's Lair. Can I just say something for a second with that particular scene right there? That scene where both Sonic and Tails did somehow manage to high-five each other is completely unnecessary. Why is that exactly, Sonic? Well, not only about the fact that both Amy and Knuckles are the only ones they did somehow manage to jump off the plane, as soon as we realize about the fact that both Sonic and Tails are almost about to die with that particular plane crash. Well, as a result, no matter what, that was about the fact that they're both completely fine, so no surprise there. So, hey, what's up, ladies and gentlemen? It is I, am the one and only Sonic the Hedgehog here. And I'm Amy Rose here, and we are back for the likes of the Maxi Toys videos. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more Let's Play of Sonic Boom, Rise of Lyric. In some cases, I hate this game so much, for the Nintendo Wii U, and only for the Wii U. So, last time, we did somehow manage to able to explore into Sky Citadel, and that was actually quite alright with that particular level, despite the fact that we did fell off quite a few times, mainly because of the forms of that particular unexpected crumbly platforms, and every once in a while that was about the fact that, you know, as far as the actual specific things are concerned, that obviously that was about the fact that when it comes to the forms of combat and all that stuff, I will admit though it's actually quite alright, and despite the fact that we come across into a problem with Tails' mech bot, that sometimes about the fact that our timing skills was a bit off, mainly because no matter what though, I just want to get this game done and over with. Well, unless if I was being curious to know that I might play that game on my own time for a bit, when it comes to likely for this game in particular, for able to actually achieving the 100% completion, despite the fact that it's nothing more but bragging rights. So, I was gonna say that right about now. So anyway, today, ladies and gentlemen, we'll present you the true finale of our Let's Play of Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric for the Wii U. And ladies and gentlemen, as what Amy has already mentioned about this earlier, here we are on to the final level in the game, known as Lyric's Lair. And the reason why we ended up there in the first place is because we definitely need to get ourselves our crystals back. So, no matter what though, hopefully we should be able to actually defeat Lyric once and for all. So relatively speaking now about the fact that I'm really expecting that this level won't give me that much trouble, unlike the forms of how it does it in quite a few levels in the past, ranging from the sake of the forms of, let's just say, the first hub world that we've somehow come across into the only game-breaking glitch that we somehow immediately come across into, and in addition to the forms of some boring combat in the past few levels. So fundamentally speaking, I was about the fact that this will be a true definition of the final time to deal with a lot of combat, meaning about the fact that, well, as a result, no matter what, that was about the fact that certain enemies are going to get much more stronger, and not to mention that was about the fact that trying to deal with them is actually going to take a lot longer than I thought, especially because, for those of you probably wondering, why this video's length is actually pretty long as it stands, well, let me tell you straight off the bat though, there's going to be a lot of times about the fact that we can able to actually come across into a lot of negativity when it comes to the forms of this entire game itself. I mean, relatively speaking, I was about the fact that some people seem to say that yes indeed, that this game is easily one of the worst Sonic games ever made, like I said before, next to the forms of quite a number of Sonic games, ranging from Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, and on top of that with the forms of, I would say, probably Sonic Chronicles The Dark Brotherhood, at least because the visual presentation looks bleak, and on top of that, the music sounds dreadful. Well, at least the gameplay is okay enough, despite the fact that the game heavily acquires you to able to do a lot of power moves in order able to actually successfully try to deal with every single battle encounters, including boss fights as well. So relatively speaking, I was about the fact that, and that was also to the point where, well, I'll talk more about that until whenever we finish up this whole entire game. So it is also worth noting for this will be the final time to able to doing certain mark speed sections. So no matter what, that was about the fact that, meaning about the fact that there's going to be even more frame rate dips. So yeah, I've got nothing else to say about this, I guess. So, and even then though, for what I've looked at the forms of Lyric's Lair as far as the layout is concerned, it does kind of reminds me like a similar vibes as the forms of the grid, based off from Tron Legacy or something like that, on those specific topics worth noting for, especially concerning for the fact that, well, despite the fact I just sometimes manage able to get distracted at points, well, that's just clearly because I just want to try to activate certain switches and what have you, and as a result, we can still able to technically try to get some more rings from time to time after getting hit by multiple hazards, including certain enemies as well. So relatively speaking, I was about the fact that you can still easily run into those specific hazards very easily, not only because of the forms of stiff movement, but it's also about the fact that the frame rate drops. So no matter what though, no surprise there. And it's also worth noting for us about the fact that when it comes to forms of certain topics at this point today, well, for those of you probably wondering about the fact that yes indeed, is about the fact that, well, today's date of course here is the 11th of July today, in some cases in 2024 today. So potentially speaking, I was about the fact that we've only got about 1 week left until Nintendo World Championships NES Edition is going to be releasing on the Nintendo Switch. So naturally you can able to actually be playing through the exact same selections of NES games all over again, ever since enjoying the forms of the Nintendo Switch Online subscription services when it comes to the NES games, except the fact that it's all bite-sized challenges and all that stuff. So yeah, you probably get the idea about that. And there's also worth noting for is about the fact that yes indeed, that particular game will feature the rewind feature. So naturally speaking, it was about the fact that if you made several mistakes, then obviously though you can able to rewind time. So just in case you can able to try that particular attempt again, despite the fact that the actual in-game time will still able to carry forward. So relatively speaking, it was about the fact that if you really up for the challenge, well, by all means, you can able to actually enjoy that particular game, despite the fact that, well, obviously though we are sadly not going to be able to try to get the game for the time being, especially because no matter what though is about the fact that, like I said this before, since on Tuesday, that I'm currently... What the heck is that? I somehow clipped for that boundary. Oh, jeez. Well, that's the thing for this point, Sonic, is about the fact that every once in a while, there might be a few annoying moments where we somehow clip for the boundaries, and as a result, it's not pleasant to see, especially concerning for the fact that if you're busy trying to do a lot of combat situations, obviously that is about the fact that you easily managed able to actually clip right through the wall, and as a result, no matter what though, it does kind of reminds me of like a similar situation. There was actually a game called Dragon Ball Z Sagas, which did somehow came out on not only the Nintendo GameCube, but also on the PlayStation 2 and OG Xbox. And I felt incredibly bad for the sake of the forms of the OG Xbox, by the way, because back in during the forms of sometime in 2005, around the same year as when the forms of how Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 1, as well as Super Dragon Ball Z, well, technically speaking on the arcade version most likely, that obviously Dragon Ball Z Sagas is the only OG Xbox Dragon Ball Z game they've ever got. And as a result, after that though, that basically the majority of the games did manage to came out on the PlayStation 2, Nintendo Wii, and eventually PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, and much, much more. So I thought it was also very surprising about this too, that none of those Dragon Ball Z games will never be released on the Nintendo Wii U, mainly because as far as I'm concerned, that there's a lack of third-party support on the Wii U itself, which no wonder why, that the Wii U itself is actually a massive flop. So, potentially speaking of, because, well, you get the idea for this point. So, anyway, there's also another thing that's worth noting for, actually, is that recently, Inside Out 2 has now officially became, it's still on top at the moment when it comes to the forms of the highest grossing films in 2024 so far. So, naturally speaking, when it comes to looking back on the top 10 films has been listed for the sake of the films of the highest grossing films of 2024. Number 1 is still obviously be Inside Out 2, because, you know, that film is much more successful. And second goes to June Part 2. And third place goes to Godzilla Cross Kong, The New Empire. Okay. And fourth place goes to Kung Fu Panda 4. And fifth place goes to YOLO. And sixth place currently, as far as this point right now, is Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. And seventh place goes to Pegasus 2. And 8th place at the moment right now, which appears to be Bad Boys Ride or Die. And 9th place goes to Article 20. And finally, 10th place at the moment is Bonnie Bear's Time Twist. So, and as far as I'm usually can tell, that in a later on, in Journey Films have been this year entirely for 2024, maybe it's a possibility about the fact that I think maybe that Despicable Me 4 will eventually be added for the sake of the highest grossing films of 2024 when it comes to the top 10 lists. So, and as far as I'm aware, that Inside Out 2 is now the highest grossing movie in Pixar films history of all time. Which I will say, I was very pleased about that. Especially considering for the fact that at this point right about now, that obviously that was about the fact that it did certainly beat out The Incredibles 2 box office financial results. So naturally speaking, it was about the fact that it's almost trying to catch up with not only with Frozen 1, but as well as the Super Mario Bros. Movie, as well as Frozen 2, and that's as far as I can think about it. I was originally trying to able to mention about the films of the Lion King live-action movie, but let's just say I'm probably not going to talk about that unless about the fact I do somehow realize that until next Friday or something, my god, that film will be 5 years old. And I'm gonna say, after experiencing the actual film, and as far as while we're looking back on it though, I still find that particular remake is incredibly bleak, and it's also lackluster and disappointing at the same time. Because as far as I'm usually concerned, I'd much rather rewatch the animated counterparts, you know, with the 2D animation and stuff like that back in the day, since 1994. Because obviously though, that the original is still as a masterpiece compared to the films of this god-awful live-action movie. In fact, I did not go back into that film at all since when it first came out in 2019, and I'm gonna say, while looking back on it though, that film is dull and I did not enjoy it anymore. Especially concerning after that particular moment where a lot of people seemed able to really want to like rewatch the original The Lion King all over again, like multiple times, ranging from Disney Plus subscription services alongside with the forms of home media entertainment ranging from VHS alongside with the forms of DVD, and even nowadays with Blu-ray as well as 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray, which I think is actually pretty top-notch, all things considered, when it comes to likely for its multiple releases of The Lion King, as far as, you know, for the animated version, as far as I was able to try to expect for this point. So, but I digress. And there's also another thing it's worth noting for is about the fact that there's a game called Battlefield 1943 that game did originally came out in 2009, to be more specifically 8th of July, and as far as I'm aware, that game has already became 15 years old. So yeah, I've got nothing else to say about it. I've definitely heard about that, but as far as I'm usually experiencing when it comes to the forms of first-person shooting games, as far as I'm aware, I found it was a little bit finicky to try to able to play around with. I will have to be honest for this point right there. Although, to be fair though, it's about the fact that everyone else out there seemed to really enjoy that game back in the day, even on the PlayStation 3 version, as well as the Xbox 360 version as far as I'm aware, but that's besides the point either. So, anyways, we're going back into the baby mode version of this particular title puzzle based off from Sonic Frontiers. But that's just clearly because, again, there are no penalties if you accidentally land on this wrong tile or panel for that matter. So, but either way. And there's also another thing it's worth noting for why I'm noticing this, is about the fact that I'm pretty concerned about the fact that when it comes to forms of other stuff worth noting for, as far as what Ray the Flying Squirrel has already mentioned about this since yesterday, that obviously that was about the fact that it's pretty nice about the fact that Shrek 5 is now a thing, and as far as I'm aware, when it comes to the voice cast, well, I'm pretty sure we might as well still able to actually consider that we're still about to be able to actually having ourselves Mike Myers as Shrek, alongside with the films of one of those other actors that we might be familiar with in the past, technically 3 films, because as far as I'm aware, Puss in Boots will make its return after the events of Shrek 2, Shrek the Third, as well as Shrek Forever After, including honorable mentions such as Puss in Boots, as well as Puss in Boots The Last Wish, and as far as I'm aware, Eddie Murphy will once again going to be voicing Donkey, and as far as I'm aware, one of those actors will once again going to be voicing, well, Princess Fiona. So, that should be interesting. And as far as I'm aware, we have no idea what the premise of the film is going to be like, alongside with the films of the actual what the main villain is going to be like. I mean, sure about the fact that we've already got Lord Farquaad from the first film, as well as the fairy godmother in the second film, and Prince Charming from the third one, which I found was completely unnecessary, not only because he was completely idiotic, but it's also about the fact that, well, he's technically a previous villain from the sake of the films of Shrek 2, despite the fact that, well, obviously though, we're not going to get into any spoiler details for the time being. So, anyway, and as far as I'm aware, I can't really remember what the villain is actually called in the sake of the films of Shrek Forever After. Well, mind you about the fact that I barely remembered it, unlike the films of how it does it in both Shrek 1 and 2, because obviously though, as far as what Ray has already mentioned about this before, that both Shrek 1 and Shrek 2 are timeless classics when it comes to DreamWorks movies alike, alongside with the films of other films as well, ranging from Over the Hedge, alongside with the films of Chicken Run, and The Prince of Egypt, Ants, and much, much more, despite the fact that a lot of people found Ants a bit more controversial, at least every nowadays, especially because it's almost like a, you know, a direct counterpart of A Bug's Life, which you probably get the idea with the exact same concepts, except the fact that the entire, you know, certain parts are entirely different when it comes to both of those films, even though the entire concept is pretty much the same. But, oh jeez, I totally forgot about that particular lasers, that if you dare touch them, then obviously though you're gonna get hurt. So, and relatively speaking, we have to do with even more tile puzzles here and there. So, relatively speaking, it was about the fact that, as far as I'm aware, that Lyric's Lair is going to be very lengthy indeed, especially because not only we have to do with some, you know, very simple, easy puzzles, but it's also about the fact that, like we've already established that earlier, we have to do with a lot more combat here and there. So, because of that, though, but luckily, though, we're nearly at the end of this game now, so expecting to believe that eventually until the next day, I should probably be able to actually save that particular topic if we manage able to finish this game up for reals. So, anyways though, and as far as other things I would like to discuss, well, I'm afraid to tell you for this point, guys, there's nothing else I could really speak about, aside from the fact that, well, let's run down the list about the fact that how come this game nowadays is officially sucks. Like, for one noticeable thing, as far as I've already mentioned about this countless amount of times already, that the game itself is rushed as far as development, as far as I'm concerned. Like, usually relatively speaking, though, it's ranging from the fact that, let's just say, that the game itself looks really, really ugly, even on the Wii U game standards. Like, I will admit, though, right away, is about the fact that, well, usually for the sake of convenience, about the fact that, oh jeez, I totally forgot about that particular rotating lasers. But either way, so, again, nothing else I can really say about it, apart from the fact that there's one little, or actually quite a few things that we totally forgot to mention about throughout the majority of the game itself, actually, that there's technically some other modes you can able to actually interact with. Like, for instance, there's the forms of a, well, let's just say the actual concept art menu, where basically though is about the fact that if you're really curious of what to know, of what the concept art actually looks like, before the actual game itself has officially launched. So, by all means, you can able to actually check that out if you can. And there's also another multiplayer mode in this game, that's what appears to be team challenges, where you basically have to do with, like, let's just say 3 modes in particular, which is not much in comparison to the forms of how it does it on certain Sonic spin-off games throughout the years. Like, for instance, it's about the fact I believe that you have to do with one mode that basically we have to able to beat even more enemies, and despite the fact that you have to do it with more auto-scrolling segments from time to time, and on top of that, there's also to the point where you have to able to push these colorful balls, and that's as far as I can try to say about it. Mind you, because I don't really care about the forms of team challenges as far as this is concerned. I mean, let's face it though, it's about the fact that I'm telling you right now, you won't be missing a gosh darn thing. Like, it's incredibly bare bones, and really, there are much more better multiplayer experiences out there when it comes to Sonic games. Hell, I think I would say that both Shadow the Hedgehog, including with the forms of Sonic 06, is actually the better option when it comes to the forms of multiplayer experiences, despite the fact that Shadow the Hedgehog's multiplayer is pretty bare bones, because obviously though, there are only 3 stages, and there's only one game mode. That's what appears to be a death battle rather than just King of the Hill, alongside with the forms of some other modes I can possibly think about. But aside from all that stuff though, that's as far as I can try to able to explain about that you're not going to be missing that much when it comes to multiplayer in this game. Aside from that hideous 2-player co-op in story mode, because not only because, you know, textures are even blurrier and the lighting effects has been removed completely, and you know what, the awful frame rate is lowered even further. Like, co-op makes the game worse in every way. I mean, relatively speaking, though, it's about the fact that, you know, one player can able to take control of the Wii U gamepad, and the other one can able to actually play on the TV. Like, for instance, with the Wii U Pro controller is pretty much compatible. Now, I'm not exactly sure about the forms of other controllers, though. Like, for instance, with the Wii Emote and stuff like that. Because mind you about the fact that I couldn't be bothered able to actually test out 2-player mode, because there was nothing right to hum about. So, but I digress though. I do apologize for my commentary because it's a little bit slightly iffy at some form or another. But that's just clearly because this game is already bored me to death. And potentially speaking of, thankfully for this point guys, like I said this countless amount of times already, that this is the finale of the game basically. So potentially speaking of, we are almost done with this particular boring Sonic games I've ever played. And it's also one of the worst games I've ever played. So generally speaking, I was about the fact that, well, then again, we probably should able to discuss more about that particular true final thoughts, and even especially noticeable once we finish up the main game. Then obviously though, we'll talk more details about that afterwards though. But suffice to say though, is about the fact that, well, that I'm very glad that we've almost nearly at the end of this, basically. So yeah, I was gonna be thinking about the same thing for this point, Sonic, especially concerning for the fact that you know how tomorrow that Ray the Flying Squirrel, that he's actually having a lot of fun for able to experiencing Sonic Rush Adventure right now, and as far as I'm concerned, that he's now onto the 6th zone. So as a result, we can't tell you exactly what the next zone that Ray the Flying Squirrel he's now onto right now. So generally speaking, we'll have to wait and find out. So either way, seriously, we're going to be collecting some more crowns, which I know it seems very unnecessary, but that's besides the point. Although aside from the fact that we somehow managed to occasionally try to able to grab certain shinies, and exponentially though, if we somehow manage to deliver those shinies to sticks, then obviously though we will able to actually get ourselves some even more crowns for the sake of upgrading stuff. Which, speaking of upgrading some stuff though, that's basically though is about the fact that recently, we finally managed to able to get ourselves our brand new laptop battery replaced. So potentially speaking though, that the battery itself for my current laptop right now is actually much more better right now. So thankfully we don't have to worry about the forms of some occasional annoying moments is. Like for instance, before we get ourselves with our new battery replaced for our laptop, my goodness, it just, every time whenever we do manage to charge it for a certain amount of time, obviously though, the screen just go completely black out, and as a result, no matter what though, not only does it force us to able to go back onto the login screen again, but it's also about the fact that it just goes back onto that particular HP logo again, just for the sake of trying to boot it up again. So because of that though, that's very annoyingly consistent, but I do manage to discover about the fact that the battery itself is completely, not only, you know, faulty, but it's also, I do realize it actually contains a massive lump, meaning that the battery itself is completely flat. So no matter what though, it's about the fact that we are very happy that our battery is now being replaced recently. So that means we can now able to actually do some more capture footage and what have you. To be more specifically, with specifically WarioWare Move It, along with any other like Nintendo Switch games in the future. But unfortunately though, we have to go through this game first before we're able to actually go back onto WarioWare Move It for the sake of time. So yeah, you probably get the idea for what this is going. So, but anyway, and as far as I'm aware, it's about the fact that, obviously though, it's about the fact that recently, KevKing74, that he's still busy decided able to actually go back onto Kirby Squeak Squad, aka Kirby Mouse Attack, for those of you who lived in European countries recently, and so far he's actually doing quite well, despite the fact that he once again come across into that particular technical issue again, but this time it's basically, ever since Enduring Forms have been part 1, 2, as well as 3, that once again he did manage to come across into microphone issues again. So relatively speaking, hopefully in the later parts to come, obviously though he will try to fix that at some point. So either way, and potentially speaking for this point guys, that's as far as we can able to talk about in terms of the forms of what's been happening for the past few days, including certain recent news for the time. So because of that though, aside from the fact that you know how the fact that Ray the Flying Squirrel, he already mentions about the forms of how the fact that we somehow got a patch update for Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door Switch Remake, including Nintendo Switch Sports, and even Mario Kart Tour, despite the fact that we have no idea of what specific information does that gives us for that particular update for Mario Kart Tour in mind. So, well, despite the fact I still don't usually play that game that much either, well, that's just clearly because no matter what though, it's just about the fact that when it comes to likely going back onto some previous tours for the sake of the forms of certain reruns, that obviously though is about the fact that I'm just basically just almost getting to retire mode for the sake of experiencing Mario Kart Tour, especially that now we've actually got almost the majority of tracks returned from Mario Kart Tour and brought it over to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, except for one. That's of course Chronoplant Pipeline, because obviously that is about the fact that not only does that track looks a bit simplistic, but it's also about the fact that, well, obviously that is about the fact that it's like a traditional grassy land environment, something very similar to the forms of how it does it for like the majority of the new Super Mario Bros. Games or something. So that's as far as I can think about it, but either way. So anyway, and let's just go ahead and do some more dodging stuff and also collecting certain rings potentially, and I have no idea what the heck just what the heck is happening to that particular camera angle with Knuckles right there, but either way. So it looks like we've almost nearly at the end right now, especially not only we are almost nearly at the end, but something tells me about the fact that after dealing with some more sections right there, then obviously though we can able to have a one-on-one confrontation with the forms of, well, Lyric himself. And generally speaking, that was about the fact that, well, like we've already established that before, I believe that potentially gonna lead us to the final boss in the game, basically. So either way, and it looks like there are some more enemies, but thankfully that door has been shut, so thanks to that particular very weird robot character, which we totally forgot he exists, because obviously that was about the fact that, well, the only time he does manage to appear on is both this, alongside with the forms of Sonic Boom, Shadow Crystal, but that's as far as I can try to explain of how the fact that that particular robot fella did only appear in 2 games specifically, and not so much in the forms of the TV series of Sonic Boom. So either way though, that seems a bit of a missed opportunity on my ad, but either way. So I think, fundamentally speaking though, we are now on to the final Mark Speed section in the whole entire game, I'm pretty sure, despite the fact that this section is going to be filled to the brim with not only certain springs, but also certain collectibles that, yeah, there's nothing else I can really say about it. I mean, the game has already bored me enough as it is, especially concerning for the fact that, well, I just really wish about the fact that this game will have a lot of emphasis on speed and everything. Well, despite the fact that this game is already not only slow paced, but it's also about the fact that, well, as I mentioned this earlier, the game is extremely boring, especially because of all that, you know, combat was involved. But either way,
The time has come to finish what we started 1,000 years ago. Now go destroy every plant, every animal, everything that lives and breathes. Then, together, we will build a glorious world of metal. Rise, my warriors.
The only world of metal you're going to is the junkyard.
You've been a thorn in my side for 1,000 years. But now I know your weakness, Sonic. It's your friends.
You're wrong, Lyric. They're not my weakness. They're my strength.
And this is by far the most difficult boss in the entire game. Not because it's the final boss, not because it's too easy, it's because it has a combination of every single broken mechanic. Well, I won't say this right from a record, that basically does about the fact that there was that one time that basically does about the fact that Defi did somehow manage to go rage quit, specifically on the final boss in the game, and I'll talk more about that if we somehow managed able to beat him. So anyway, so basically this entire boss fight is divided into two sections, or technically speaking now, multiple sections here and there. Like for instance, on the first part right there, all you have to really do is about the fact that you have to beat him up, and every time whenever you do manage to able to have an inner beam with us, then obviously though, just like the forms of how it does it for Driller Worm, alongside with Dr. Eggman of course, with the Eggman mech, but it was also about the fact that, as you can tell, we can able to actually correspondingly switching over to a different character, because as you can tell, we somehow managed to go into a series of obstacles with their corresponding character. Like for instance, we've done one for Tails, so naturally speaking we can able to obtain 2 of those Chaos Crystals, and vice versa if we somehow move on to Knuckles, Amy, and Sonic. And suffice to say, I think Sonic is gonna be for last, for I've noticing this, especially because obviously he's the main character of course, so yeah, I was thinking about that, especially concerning for the fact that obviously though, the entire boss fight is extremely underwhelming, and as far as I'm aware, like you stated this before Sonic, it's a total easy and total joke at the same time, much like any other bosses in this game, because as far as I'm aware, where's the challenge? Well, it wasn't until whenever we decided able to actually do not only Sonic Superstars in the future, but it's also with the forms of eventually Sonic Cross Shadow Generations that expecting about the fact that the boss fights will be not only thrilling, but it's also very challenging at the same time. Well, then again, we'll talk more about those specific games in the future if we decide to do a Let's Play of those games potentially. So, anyways though, so it looks like we're not going to be able to take control of Knuckles on this part, because obviously though we can able to actually, oh jeez Louise, something is happening all at once. Well, thankfully though, we did not come across into a glitch or anything else like that, or potentially speaking of, a soft lock glitch, because I think that was that one point that if you dare manage to able to clip for the ground, or specifically the battle arena, obviously though you won't be able to recover from it, and the only thing you need to do when you do manage to stumble across into a soft lock glitch, obviously though you have to switch off the game and turn it back on again, and potentially speaking of what I've heard, it's not that fun. Especially because, as far as I said this before, that is where the point where... Oh no, 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 no. Don't you dare do this to me, game. Don't you dare do this to me. Come on. Oh, great. Looks like I got Sonic out. But that's okay, because we can simply just switch over to a different character for the time being, like Knuckles, for instance. So, oh, jeez. I'm almost assuming about the fact that we're about to get screwed over by this soft-locked progression. But thankfully, though, the characters have been split apart, rather than just all gathered around like nothing else. So, seriously, sometimes the AI can sometimes feel a bit, well, a bit janky sometimes. So, but either way, though, let's just go ahead and trying to able to keep on dodging his attacks, despite the fact that they are very pathetically easy to dodge. So that's as far as I can try to able to expect it. So either way, let's just go ahead and try to use the inner beam again, and this time we'll select Amy on this part because of this corresponding path right there. Yeah, because that's how I roll, even with the forms of trying to balancing out with these specific little thin platforms, and that's as far as I was expecting. So anyway, so let's just go ahead and obtain 2 more Chaos Crystals, and it looks like we've already got the final 2, which obviously myself were able to actually obtain the final 2 Chaos Crystals, basically. So either way, and obviously we somehow talked over for those scenes right there, because there was nothing right to harm about, aside from the fact that we can able to see certain character animations from time to time when it comes to able to, like, reclaiming the Chaos Crystals. So yeah, nothing else I can really say about it. So either way, and hopefully by that time, until the next couple of days or months or whatever, then obviously though we'll mention about the forms of some interesting aspects when it comes to the forms of not only gaming news, but it's also about the fact that with certain facts for certain aspects, all things considered. So, and I still kind of believe about the fact that when it comes to the forms of the box office department for Inside Out 2, it's actually growing really fast, even after the events of likely or so after quite a few weeks ago. Like, for instance, like, I would say since 4 weeks at this point, especially concerning for the fact that, well, you know, like what Ray has already mentioned about this before, that we are very glad that Pixar is now finally back when it comes to likely getting its, you know, a lot of money department for the actual box office earnings after that particular struggle with certain films ranging from Onward, Soul, Luca, Turning Red, Lightyear, and maybe a little bit on Elemental, but that's besides the point. So anyway, let's go ahead and obtain these, can you? Okay, there we go. That took a bit while to able to smash that particular container, and as a result, we've now got every single Chaos Crystals back. So potentially though, once we obtain every single Chaos Crystals, that will pretty much weaken Lyric. So either way, we've got to make sure that we don't able to come across into that particular soft lock glitch, because otherwise, if we do, then obviously we're about to go into double rage between both me and Amy respectively. Don't you want that particular rage moment, Amy? Well, I hope not, especially because we just want to get this game done and over with before we move on to the next batch of Sonic Let's Plays, for some exceptions anyway, like Sonic Jam on Game.com basically.
Interesting. Got him! Did you really think you could defeat me?
It's not every day you can hog-tie a snake.
Well, at least Shadow is here again, despite the fact that it's a little bit overly redundant right now, because obviously though we've already taken care of the final boss already.
Looks like you and your friends got the job done. Not bad.
Ah!
That's the last of them. How did you know? I've been looking for a spatula. Thank you, thank you. Okay.
We're going to celebrate this victory with ice cream. Chocolate.
No, vanilla.
Vanilla's too plain!
Chocolate isn't plain enough.
You saved a lot of people.
We saved a lot of people.
Chalk another one up for Team Sonic.
How about just team?
This is going to be so awesome!
Now, I don't know about you, but Tails' voice sounds a bit similar to Rainbow Dash, doesn't it? Well, it almost sounds a bit similar, but I digress. Thank heavens for this, because Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric is completely done. For good. And what's our final thoughts of this game? Really awful. Like, this is not a good game. This is not a good game at all, because, you know, like I said before, not only this game is incredibly boring, but it's also about the fact it's incredibly slow, and not to mention though, the game was unpolished, just like the forms of Sonic 06, alongside with the forms of Sonic the Hedgehog Genesis for the Game Boy Advance. So, generally speaking, do you know what this game reminds us of? What's that, Sonic? This game reminds me of so much of Pac-Man World 3. At the very least with Pac-Man World 3, at the very least the frame rate is actually very consistent sometimes, but nothing compares to this though, especially noticeable because, well, do I honestly decide able to recommend it? Well, it's very simple. No. Especially because not only about the fact that, like I said before, the gameplay is extremely boring and repetitive, and also the graphics are way uglier than I was expecting, and the soundtrack is, well, aside from one track I do like, and that's the main theme, but aside from that, all those musical set pieces are very generic and it's also very uninspired. And even the controls are okay enough, despite the fact that, well, we have to do the ridiculous amount of button mashing for combat and everything, and aside from that, the story in this game, similar to the forms of how it does it in Sonic 06, not only is incredibly simplistic for its story, but it's very convoluted as well, because of the stupid time travel aspect when it comes to 1,000 years kind of stuff. So, relatively speaking though, yeah, do not get this game, especially because not only is the worst, well, again, we'll discuss more of that until in a moment, because aside from that, well, if you think to yourself about the fact that, well, like we said this before, the game is now over, so this means we are finally done with Lyric, at least potentially the most forgettable villain of all time, for the sake of the Sonic franchise, and aside from all that stuff though, I would have liked able to explain something else about the forms of how this game also actually has to offer, but I'll explain more about that if we somehow managed able to, well, end off the playthrough for reals, or the Let's Play I should say. So generally speaking though, yeah, this game is not worth it, especially because, well, again, we'll discuss more about that if we go for this particular very, very slow credit sequence right there. At least on the upside, there's no copyright music this time around, so at least that's a good thing. Unlike in Sonic 06 though, that we somehow immediately stumbled across into ourselves the copyright issue in one of those staff credit sequence, specifically at the end of Sonic's story, because as far as where Maxie was concerned, that he was originally trying to able to mention about the certain gaming announcements in regards to the forms of Nintendo Direct Partner Showcase back in February in this year, but it's kind of unfortunate about the fact that a huge chunk of the actual commentary gets cut out due to the forms of this copyright issue. So aside from all that stuff though, there's nothing else I can really talk about. I mean, generally speaking, it was about the fact that, well, again, we'll discuss more about the specific other details about this in a second, because it looks like we're about to be seeing the final cutscene in the whole entire game. So let's see what this ending is all about, huh? And so, the game ends with a cliffhanger. And suffice to say for this point, Sonic, that the sequel to Rise of Lyric never happened. Yeah, exactly, Amy. If only because the game did not sell very well, and also, as far as we've already established that earlier in the credit sequence, obviously, that game is the worst of any other Sonic games to date. Easily, no contest. So, generally speaking though, that Rise of Lyric as a game itself definitely deserves to be, well, the Brown Trophy. So, that's as far as I was expecting. So, yeah, all in all. And there was also this particular difficulty unlocked by completing the game once. That's what appears to be Extreme Mode. What's the difference will that be? Well, let's just say, Amy, is that the only major difference, what I think about, is that they only somehow managed to make those enemies a lot stronger than the regular playthrough, so there's nothing right to harm about. So, oh, and did you know that this game does have DLC? Oh right, Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric has DLC. Like the cosmetic skins. They made a cosmetic skins as DLC. Like, we never brought it because we just totally forgot that game exists up until we decided able to give that game a second chance. But I will admit though right away, Amy, that the entire progression for that particular Let's Play itself wasn't nearly as awful as last time. Oh, what's so bad about last time though? Remember what I told you about the fact that Daffy did somehow come across into that, clipping for the floor glitch in the final boss in the game that I've told you about that already? Oh, yeah. Well, thankfully, though, we've never come across into that. So, I will admit, though, right away for this point, guys, I think this time around, though, unlike in 2019, though, well, for those of you who don't know, that Daffy Duck did somehow manage to able to destroy Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric as the physical game itself. This time in this year, though, we're probably not going to do that this time around for two reasons. For one, as we mentioned about this before, that we did manage to able to find a game that usually costs about 18 quid, like it's way more cheaper than the forms of how it does it for a brand new sealed copy, which as a result, it makes me a little bit of a guilty pleasure to able to get it. And second, it's one of the worst games we've ever played. I mean, sure about the fact that there are some good things here and there, but aside from that, there's nothing right to harm about, honestly, guys. Yeah, I suppose that could be making a little bit more. It's hard to explain, really. Yeah, either way. So, hope you guys do enjoy this particular Let's Play of Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric. I mean, at the end of the day, though, you should probably still not recommend getting this game, although it's especially noticeable that you can no longer get the game digitally now, because, Wii U eShop is dead. So as a result, the only option for you, though, is to get the physical version, which, thankfully, though, for secondhand conditions, is actually getting a lot more cheaper these days. Yeah, way more cheaper than brand new sealed copies, that's for sure. So, despite the fact that, like I said before, the actual sales numbers is not that very high, so as a result, similar to Sonic Chronicles The Dark Brotherhood, there's no doubt that there's not going to be a sequel to Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric, because, well, you get the idea. So I hope you guys do enjoy this particular Let's Play, because we sure did most of our time, despite how problems with the actual, the technical issues from time to time. And also not to mention, though, countless amount of delays on certain parts. Yeah, I think it's probably because we ended up having, like, a couple of illness during the forms within the past few days, specifically by the end of June, or just anything else for that matter. Yeah, I know that. So, either way, and this is me, Sonic the Hedgehog, and now I should probably be proud to able to now know this from the start, I can now call myself the Blue Blur or Blue Justice, at least for the majority whenever I go back onto certain Let's Plays in the future, including some upcoming Let's Plays as well. Yeah, I'm very glad you're able to say that again. Yeah, because of the Sonic movie references. I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen on the third Sonic movie, but we shall wait and see. So, say, Amy, would you like to able to have a nice little deal meal out together? yeah, because we certainly played that game long enough as it is, so we'll go for it. Yeah, and I wonder if Chef Toad might pop up around here somewhere. So either way though, hope you guys do enjoy this Let's Play, and I suppose that the next Sonic Boom game we'll like to tackle through, well, it wasn't until when it gets to the point until next year, in 2025. Next up, it will be Sonic Boom Shadow Crystal for the Nintendo 3DS. So, yeah, we'll have to wait and see what happens. So, yeah, as I said before, this is me, Sonic the Hedgehog, aka the Blue Blur, aka Blue Justice. And I should probably see you guys soon. So, yeah, apologize for that particular tongue twisting. So, yep, and this is me, Amy Rose, from the Sake of the Films, of also from the Maxi Toys as well. And until then, I'll see you guys at some point soon. So, bye now.